sound. Let's see. Oh, you're just seeing the Facebook feed there for some reason. You don't need that. What we want is this. Oh, I know where it is. Here we go. So it's been a couple of weeks. We had started this study on, we were going to be looking at various, social issues and things like that. And I wanted to start with postmodernism, because we were going to look at some of the philosophies that are behind a lot of these things. And so we start with an overall view of a lot of this, and then we kind of dove into postmodernism. And this was kind of our summary page at the end of that. So we really looked at Colossians especially. Colossians has a lot to say about philosophy. And in particular, we looked at that verse where Paul says, don't be taken captive by philosophies, by empty deceit, according to the elemental spirits of the world, according to human tradition. And then this is the key phrase, not according to Christ. So that's kind of broken down. We talked about how the definition of postmodernism, this is according to the first guy to use the term, Jean-Francois Lyotard, a French philosopher, whose name is super fun to say, Jean-Francois Lyotard. And he defined postmodernism as incredulity towards meta-narratives. A meta-narrative is all-encompassing story. It's really the purpose of philosophy. To look at everything that exists and say, this is why. This is how everything fits together. This is the huge story arc of all things. Well, postmodernism says we are incredulous. It means we automatically disbelieve any meta-narrative, which of course is a meta-narrative. You've sometimes probably heard postmodernism described as that there is no absolute truth. Not quite the same as that definition, but pretty close. Okay, and of course that idea is common today. So that's where we were, and I kind of left you with this picture, and I asked you, is this a dog? And somebody said yes, and this is in fact my dog Shadow, and then I said actually it's not, because this is actually
a baby that's in a crib.
What'd you say, Angie? It's actually just a picture of my dog. It is a representation of it. This is not a dog, okay? I mean, you all know what we mean when we say that, right? I'm being somewhat obtuse when I do that, but there's a reason for this. This has to do with postmodernism in the media. So there's two uses of the term postmodernism. One is what we covered last time. That is just the philosophy, incredulity towards meta-narrative. And we saw how that's opposed to Christ. We saw that our Christian perspective on all philosophy instead should be this, that we have incredulity towards any meta-narrative that isn't focused on Christ. That's what Paul's saying. Don't be taken captive by any of these philosophies that are not according to Christ. Christ is the meta-narrative of everything, okay? Makes it pretty easy and handy, right? Somebody comes with some idea, some philosophy, whatever, you heard about this, and you say, hey, where's Christ fit in that philosophy? And if they're like, well, I don't know, throw it out. If they say, oh, he's somewhere over here, throw it out. He's not in it, throw it out. Christ is everything. From him are all things, and to him are all things, and through him are all things, and for him are all things, and his justification of the sinner, that's the meta-narrative. Okay, this is a slightly different thing when you talk about postmodernism in the media, but it is connected. So at no point was this, right here, a dog or any part of a dog. Shadow's DNA is not anywhere here on this wall or in the light that is emitting it, right? It's a representation of him. It's a highly accurate one, right? This isn't like some child's painting. of a dog because we've gotten so good with cameras and stuff like that that we can make these really good representations. This is also, in a sense, logos. We talked about logos in our study before, too. That's the Greek word for word. And it's the idea, a thought, an expression, right? In what it is not a word, this picture, but it communicates things, doesn't it? When you look at, the expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words, what are some words that this picture puts in your mind? Sad, because he's been trapped in a crib. What's really funny is I stuck him in that crib, and then for a while he just stayed there as if he was trapped. I'm like, dude, you can easily get out of this crib. And then eventually he realized how easily he could get out of the crib, but for a while he was trapped, yeah. Any other words that come to mind? Like, are there any things that you can know about this dog from this picture?
Hairy.
All right, he's furry, hairy, right? His color, you can see his color is black, right? So there's some things that you can figure out about him, right? But there's a lot of things that you couldn't figure out. There are things about this picture that could be misleading, right? You can't really tell how big that dog is from the picture. You have a little bit of frame of reference because of this thing right here. You might look at him and think, people do this all the time. People come over when Shadow's fluffy like he is right now, and they think, whoa, he's really grown. No. That dog hasn't grown in 2 years. His weight is the same. He's 60 pounds. It doesn't change. He's tall, but he's really thin. But if his hair is really fluffy, he looks way bigger. And if you cut his hair, he looks like a skinny old man, right? So there's lots of things. You can't tell really his temperament. You can't tell how well there's lots of things you can't tell about him. And there are things about it that could be misleading. Well, okay, what's this? Yeah, that's the Lord's Supper. It's a famous painting by Michelangelo. This has been touched up a little bit because if you take a picture of I tried getting a picture of just the one as it hangs there and wherever it is, Louvre or something probably, and it's like faded and stuff, so it's hard to see on a picture. So this, of course, is not Leonardo da Vinci's painting, The Lord's Supper. This is a picture of a picture. And his picture, his painting, is not actually Jesus having the Lord's Supper with his disciples, right? It's a representation of that. And it's one which in probably several ways is not all that accurate. However, it is obvious that this is a painting. Like when you look at his painting, you're not like, oh, that's so realistic. I mean, you're like, it's really talented, right? But there's no way you'd be confused into thinking that this is like live video shot of the events of that night, right? You know that. It's obviously not like that. Now, another important thing to point out here is that pre-modern art, this is pre-modern art, okay? Pre-modern art strove to represent reality and truth. They're coming from the basis of a philosophy that is based on the Bible. Pre-modernism, Christianity is everywhere in Western culture, and the arts are influenced by that. Many of the greatest works of art in pre-modernity are Christian in nature. Obviously, this is. Can you think of any other examples? Some of the greatest works of art, pre-modernity, so think, especially like 1800.
Pietà,
What's that?
the Pietà, where Mary is holding.
Oh, it's a painting of Mary holding Jesus. Who did that? I don't know either. But it's famous. There's a name for it. So, yeah. Anything else? Not just art. Okay, the Sistine Chapel, and there is one particularly famous sculpture by Michelangelo? David, right? King David. That's what that's after. What about music? What are some of the most renowned pieces of music? Or just composers? Bach is generally considered the greatest composer ever. Bach was not only Christian, but he was straight up dyed-in-the-wool Orthodox Lutheran. If Martin Luther is the text, Bach is the melody of Lutheranism. Bach's theology is exactly as Martin Luther's. And all of his music, all the ones that have words anyway, express that. His cantatas, his oratorios, all this stuff, an incredible amount of music, right? Some of the greatest music ever. It's Christian in nature, deeply Christian. Also, Handel's Messiah. Now, Handel, if I remember this right, wasn't a Christian when he began writing that, But by the end, he was. That's deeply Christian in nature. Beautiful piece of thing. All right, so all of this is meant to represent reality and truth. They're assuming that things are true. It's based on ideas of the Bible, and it views Jesus, it has the right meta-narrative, and it's focused on representing that. But, it's also not like hyper real, right? You look at this is a 13th century painting of a whale, okay? You can tell that it's some kind of fish, but nobody would look at that and be confused and think, oh, maybe that's a live shot of a whale. There's great skill involved, but it's not quite the same thing. Well, one thing that's weird that's happened is that as our media has gotten better and faster, things have gotten strange. Our simulations of things often look so real that they sometimes make us think that they are real. And then we get simulations of simulations. And people get more and more confused, sometimes without even realizing it, and there's a harder and harder time telling the difference between what is real and what is not. I used this as an example a few weeks ago, but I'll bring it up again, because when I used it, I had heard about it, then I watched it. So there's a show called Chernobyl, and as you might be able to tell, it's about Chernobyl and the nuclear explosion of that power plant. It's an incredibly well-done show. And they did an incredible job getting all of the details about everything right when they filmed this. So they went to great lengths to make it, they made sure they had the clothes right for the era and all these different things that a lot of us wouldn't even notice. They did not, people were speaking in British accents and stuff because they decided not to make them do dopey Russian accents, and it was a good decision. So you watch something like that, and it's so real, okay? And it's talking about a true event, okay? You watch that, you get done with that, and how do you know what was real and what wasn't? It's there's a term for this, hyper-reality. You've just watched something that looks incredibly real, and it's telling a story about something that really happened. And the great majority of what's in that show is exactly what happened. But you're making a TV show. It's not a documentary, it's a drama. So some of it isn't precisely what happened. Now, it was interesting in my case when I watched it, I listened to a podcast that went along with it, where the director of the show and these other people who knew a lot about it were describing, some of the choices they made to do things that were a little bit different. But the point is, that's what people talk about postmodernism in media. They mean that things have gotten so real that you have simulations of simulations and sometimes simulations of simulations of simulations, and people don't always know what's real anymore, and that's connected with this, there's no absolute truth. People get confused, and they don't know, but we have the truth. We have the Word made flesh. And it connects with what we were talking about there in kind of an interesting way. So logos incarnate. Earlier in our study, we talked about what logos means: a thing, a word, a thought, reason, logic, etc. Made flesh, not a simulation. He's not made into an image. He's made flesh. In whom dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily. Hebrews 1:3. He is the radiance of the glory of God in the exact imprint of his nature. So there was a big argument about this in the early church. This is where our creeds come out of. I remember one time somebody, really well-meaning guy, commenting to me, he said, sometimes I think those prophets at Emmanuel get too specific about things. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? And he says, well, like in the creed, when it says, being of one substance with the Father. And I said, my friend, the professors at Emmanuel did not write the Nicene Creed. I promise you. It was 325 AD. And that is a straight quote from the Bible. The Bible is very specific about the substance, the nature. So there was this fight at the time of Arius, that the Nicene Creed came out of. And the question was, is Jesus of the same substance as the Father, or of a similar substance with the Father? And the answer from the Scriptures is quite obvious. There's a bunch of passages. All the fullness of the Godhead dwells bodily in him. The radiance of the glory of God in the exact imprint of his nature. But by imprint, it doesn't mean like a photo. It means his exact essence and being. And that's why it says in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. And there's a bunch more passages that say the same thing. We actually have this, the word that's translated as substance here is homoousios, means same substance. And that word shows up in the Bible describing Jesus' nature. So he's not a representation. He's all that God is. In no way is he deceiving or misleading about anything that God is. He is not a word about flesh. He is the word made flesh. It's kind of similar. There's this series of books that I read a few years ago, really fascinating. I love fantasy fiction stuff. And there's this author named Daniel Abraham. And I can't even remember what the series is called. But in this book, all these fantasy fiction books, they got different types of like magic systems, right? So in this book, this is the way it works. There are these people called poets. And if a poet, what his job is they study for years and years and years and years and years to be able to do this just one time, all right? If they can exactly define some concept, right? Perfectly define the concept, they can bring the concept into living being. So with words, they're supposed to perfectly describe. In this book, these beings are sort of like divine-like characters when they come into being, but they're bound to the poet who brought them into being. But they kind of hate the poet who brought them into being. There's this like friction. So one of these beings is called seedless, and his power is to make a thing lose its seed. And the way that they use this, they use these guys for like their economy, is they use it to make like harvesting grain really easy. This guy has the power to just, boom, make the seeds fall out of the whatever, from the wheat. This guy ends up later doing some really awful things because you could probably easily imagine some awful things that somebody with that power could do. So anyway, the idea is you have this concept, you have this word, and you make it flesh, right? Well, Jesus is the word of the Father, his exact nature from eternity, not something that some human being perfectly described and thus brought into flesh, but that the Father spoke into being. He existed from eternity, and then he made him flesh. So in every way, he is all that God is in a way that we can see. John also says that he's full of grace and truth. All right, we're going to keep coming back to these two terms, grace and truth. Grace, God's undeserved love for us, and truth, that's the big T, objective truth, the thing that postmodernism doesn't have any time for, right? Incredulity towards meta-narratives, there is no truth. That's what they're saying. These are the two most important aspects that John draws out in his gospel about Jesus. He is all grace and truth. This is the meta-narrative, and we're going to see this play out in the I am statements. Right? So we're going to take these two ideas, and that unlike postmodernism in media, which gets all confused, like is that a thing or is it a representation of a thing? We have Jesus, who is the real and genuine, true substance of the Father made flesh, the Word made flesh. He is grace made flesh. And we see this in the I am statements. So, I am the bread of life from John chapter 6. We'll look at some of this in detail in a second. But understand it like this. As we go through these, Jesus is not like bread. That's not what he means. This is not a simile. This is not a metaphor. Jesus is not saying, I am like bread. Jesus knew how to use similes. In the parables, he said, the kingdom of heaven is like. But he doesn't do that in these John statements. I am the bread of life. What Jesus means in all of these is that he is the OG. You guys know that terminology? Kids like to use that these days. He's the OG. What does it mean? The original what?
Is it a gangster?
I think so. The original gangster. I think that's what they mean. But they use it in terms, people use it in a lot of ways, but sometimes they just mean they're like, these are my original friends, right? These are the ones that were there with me at the beginning. It gets used in slang in all kinds of ways, right? But you just think of the original, okay? That's what Jesus is. Jesus isn't saying, I'm a little bit like bread. He's saying bread's a little bit like me. I am the true bread. Why? Well, let's look at some of these passages about that. Dan, would you like to read the first one there at the top?
Jesus then said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world.
What's he talking about when he says it was not Moses who gave you the bread from heaven? The manna in the wilderness, right? Okay, but even that, I suppose, wasn't technically literal bread. It wasn't wheat, right? But it provided sustenance for them in the wilderness, right? They ate it and they lived instead of dying because God provided this miraculous food from heaven. But he says that wasn't the true bread. Notice that use of the word true. It's going to pop up a lot as we're looking at these I am statements. Jesus is saying that bread that Moses gave from heaven, that's not the true bread. He says the true bread is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. So notice the parallel. God sends manna down from heaven to give life to the people of Israel in the wilderness. God sends his son down from heaven to give life. Bread gives life. Jesus gives life. Bread is a picture of Jesus and not the other way around. Verse 35. Chris, you want to read that?
Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst.
So he's saying that people have a hunger and a thirst for Jesus. That Jesus gives a life that is eternal. And that the way that we hunger and thirst for food and water is a picture. It's a smaller thing, reminding us of the true need that we have, the true hunger and thirst for Jesus. Joe, you want to read the next section there?
I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, and they died. This is the bread that comes down from heaven, so that one may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh.
Okay, so from this section there that Joe just read, why is ordinary bread not true bread? Because you still die. So if the purpose of food is to give life, but you eat food and you still die, it's not true food. That's his point. It's only temporary. It's only small. Not only is it that you have to eat it again, but also, is there any kind of food that you haven't seen a headline about saying something like, this can cause cancer? Like, well, you got to eat something, okay? Like, goodness, right? Now, certainly there's some foods that are a lot better than others. Some foods give sustenance and give life a lot better than others, but this food of, even the food that God literally sent from heaven, the manna in the wilderness, they had to keep eating it. I'm pretty sure that food wouldn't have given them cancer, but they had to keep eating it. It's not true food. Jesus is saying, I'm true food. Now, in case you're wondering, he's not talking about the Lord's Supper here. It sure sounds like it, I understand, but we know from the text that it's not for several reasons. What he's really talking about, we're not going to get deep into that right now because it's not the focus, but he's talking about believing in him. So that's the focus of this section, believing in Jesus and his death upon the cross. That's true bread. All right, we have another one here. I am the light of the world. I don't know what my computer is doing right now, but I hope it stops. I'd like to see my notes, please. Okay. I am the light of the world. Here we go. All of these, by the way, I should have started with this too. Whenever in John's gospel he says, I am, then he's fill in the blank, I am the true bread, I am the light of the world. Those words, I am, are a reference to the name, the personal name of God in the Old Testament, Yahweh, which means I am. Whenever Jesus says this, he is claiming to be the true substance of the Father in human flesh. And then he's adding something to this with these different phrases that he makes. I am the light of the world. And he means I and I only am the light of the world, right? I am the true light. I am the true bread. So again, it's not a metaphor. He's not saying I am like light. He is saying I created light. And it is a little bit like me. Remember, Jesus is the meta-narrative. All things are from him and to him and through him. So everything that he created, it's like him. God's not like a father. Fathers are like God. That's what it was all made for. All right, let's look at some of these passages. Shane, you want to read? John 8:12.
I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life.
And Terry, you want to read John 1:4?
In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.
And Angie, the last one.
The true light, which is light to everyone who is coming into the world.
Notice again the use of the word true. The true light is Jesus. Other lights are temporary. What does light do? Okay, so it first of all, it illumines things, shows you the way to go. What else does light do? What's the best, by the way, let's back this up. What's the best light, other than Jesus, that we have? The sun. By far, right? Not close. What does the sun do? for us? It sustains life, right? In a lot of ways. But like all of the food that we get kind of comes from light. So we're sort of back up, well, we have this food, but that food comes from light, okay? It causes crops to grow, makes us feel a lot better. Middle of the winter, we get a couple days like this where it's sunny outside and you just, right? Because it's literally giving us certain vitamins through shining on us like that. It's incredible, the kind of energy and life and illumination and insight and understanding that comes from the light of the sun. Jesus is saying, sun ain't got nothing on me. That's a picture of me, and it's a small picture of me. I give the true life. He enlightens us. So his word shows us the truth, and it shows us the way to go. He gives the true life that lasts forever. He shines in us. He is a light that makes us light. When the sun shines on you, it doesn't make you light. But Jesus does. So in every way, Jesus is the true light. All right? This one we won't spend a lot of time on. Because there's no, Jesus just says, before Abraham was, I am. There's nothing after the I am. Because in this one, he just wants to make it really clear that he's saying, I am Yahweh. He just says it like that I've always existed. No metaphor here. Clearly a major truth claim, though. He's claiming to be the I am. All things are for him and from him and through him. All right. Wow, you can't even see that one on the picture. Well, it's a good thing that we've got the text coming up next. Let's see. Chris, do you want to read that, if you can see that?
Yes, sir. So Jesus again said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep.
Mm-hmm.
And all who came before me are thieves, robbers, but the sheep did not listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and go in and out and find pasture.
All right, so again, Jesus isn't saying I'm like a door. Jesus is saying I am the door. What does a door do? Yeah, it lets you to go through one place to another place, gets you to get into somewhere, right? Some people I've seen some cool collages of pictures where people go through an old city and take pictures of all these cool different doors, right? And the Ark, they love to highlight the door there at the Ark. And the reason they do that, there's several reasons. One of them is because in the account of the flood, it mentions how God shuts the door to seal Noah and his family in to keep them safe. And also because Jesus is the door. So Jesus, in this passage, what is he saying? He actually uses this in two senses. He is the door. He is the one through whom you can gain access to what? So that's the first one. He's the door of the sheep, the door by which the sheep can go in and out. So he's using this image from, in those days, the people of a village, there would be like one sheep pen, and they'd all be inside these walls, and there's one door, and then there's a shepherd that stands at that door, okay? You can't go in and out other than him. He's saying anyone who doesn't come in by the door, well, somebody tries to come into the sheep, and they're not going in by the door, it means they're what? Well, a wolf, right? Or a thief, or a robber, right? They don't mean good things for the sheep. If they did, they'd be coming through the door. So this has a two-way idea. Jesus is the only way for a true pastor to come to the sheep. If you have somebody who's coming to the sheep in some other way, they're a thief and a robber. But also, the main essence is that Jesus is the way for us to go to the Father, for us to go to heaven. He is the door. He is the only door. And that is the true door. Everything else, when you see a door, you can think, well, that's a picture of Jesus. Jesus intended that. This is what I mean. When Jesus created the sun and the light, he intended that for it to be a picture of how he's the true light. When he created food, he intended that to be a picture to you of how he's the true food, and the same thing with the doors. Every time you see a door, you're like, oh, that's a little bit like Jesus. You can tell your kids that. All right? I think you can probably tell from this one what the next one is going to be, and probably also because we're already in John 10 with I am the door of the sheep, because we get two of these in John 10. Two of these I am statements. All right, John 10, verse 11. Don, you want to read that?
I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep.
Thank you. I am the good shepherd. And Don, how about the next one? Verse 14, if you can see it.
I am the good shepherd. I know my own, lay down my life for the sheep.
And then Craig, 27 and 28.
My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they will never perish, and no one will snatch them out of my hand.
Okay, what here makes Jesus a true shepherd that other shepherds are only a pale imitation of? What is the key feature he is saying makes him and the way he words this in Greek is, I am the shepherd, the good one. Like the one and only, the true one. What feature of Jesus is it that makes him above all other shepherds? I lay down my life for the sheep. That's the one. And because of that, he also says, I have the authority to lay it down and I have the authority to take it up again. He's saying any true shepherd won't run away when the wolf comes. He'll lay down his life for the sheep. Now, that's true of other earthly shepherds. Like if a shepherd cares for his flock, he'll defend his sheep against like a wolf or something. But he wouldn't lay his life down. Because what good would that do? By lay his life down, the shepherd goes, he puts his life at risk to fight against the wolf, but he's not going and saying, well, I'm going to die. If he thought that, what would be the point? The sheep will get ravaged anyway, and he'll be dead. But Jesus lays his life down for the sheep because he takes it up again. He's the only one who can do that. And that is also why he says, this is the other key feature about him and his sheep. In the last section, it's not so much about that he lays down his life, but that how well he knows them. Shepherds know their sheep really well, and sheep know their shepherd's voice. They actually, each shepherd in the Middle East basically has this it's like this 20 to 30 second song. It's like a yodel that's unique to each of them, and they sing it out, whatever, over the hills, and the sheep come running. They know theirs, and they ignore everyone else's. So Jesus is using that. He's saying, well, okay, that's a little picture of me. Again, he's the true shepherd. He's the original, and it's all about his grace and truth. Notice in all of these, you're getting grace and truth. The grace of salvation, the truth, that Jesus is the truth, that he's the meta-narrative, etc. Okay, next chapter of John. I am the resurrection and the life. I want to back up. I thought I had the whole thing set out there, but I guess I didn't. How do I go back?
We need to yell at it.
I don't think that'll work, unfortunately. All you guys get to see my meme. You get a pre-glance at my meme. Okay, so obviously there is no metaphor here. This connects too with, I lay my life down for the sheep. Jesus doesn't metaphorically lay down his life for the sheep. He actually lays down his life for the sheep and takes it up again. And that helps us understand that in these I am statements, he's not speaking metaphorically. I am the resurrection of life. Again, no metaphor. He literally is the resurrection. The one who conquers death. He is the life. He has a life in himself that conquers death. His life is grace and truth. His life is the OG. His life gives life to all. 1 John brings this out a little bit more. Rachel, you want to read that?
That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked upon and touched with our hands concerning the word of life. The life was made manifest, and we have seen it and testified to it and proclaimed to you the eternal life, which was with the Father and was made manifest.
Notice, the eternal life. The life that was before all things and was made manifest to us. And we have touched it. What's he talking about? It's that which is from the beginning, which we heard, which we've seen, which we've looked on, which we have touched. What's he talking about? Jesus. Saying we've touched the life that was before all things. The resurrection and the life. And we proclaim him to you. He's manifest. The next one is from John 14. I am the way and the truth and the life. It really kind of sums up everything we've been saying. The way. This is not metaphor, okay? No one comes to the Father except by me, he says. I am the truth. I am the life. That, of course, is a meta-narrative. And it is very ironic that later on in the same gospel, what does Pilate say to Jesus? What is truth? He asks, what is truth of the truth? The truth is standing before him when he says that. And of course, Jesus in response says, this is what Pilate says in response to Jesus. Pilate said, are you a king? He says, for this purpose I was born, and for this reason I came into the world to bear witness to the truth. Pilate goes, what is truth? And, well, he is, the one standing before you. So again, no metaphors. This is why I put my meme. I don't know if it's going to work. Yes, no lies detected. People like to use this meme. Somebody says something and they put this out. No lies detected. And anything that Jesus is saying, and no metaphors detected either. These are true statements. I believe this is the last one in the Gospel of John. I am the true vine. Again, Jesus isn't like a vine. Vines are like Jesus. Jesus is the source of life. Notice a lot of these are really communicating the same concept. The branch is connected to the vine. Where does the branch end and the vine begin? But they're one. That's part of the point that Jesus is making. I am the vine, he says, you are the branches. You abide in me and I abide in you. His life flows through you and to you and from you. You are in him. You are part of him. Just like when he says you are the light of the world, but he also says I am the light of the world. It's this communion and this fellowship and this closeness and this truth that he's talking about. Well, I said that was the last one. I guess not exactly. Some people have tried to debate this, but they're just wrong. This is clearly his point in this section, and I'll explain why. This is really the last of the I am statements. Maria, you want to read? Oh, I skipped to Debbie. Debbie, can you see that?
That's in the way.
Oh, okay. Otherwise, I can have Maria. Okay, Maria, you want to go ahead and read that?
Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with them. When Jesus said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground.
Okay, there's only 2 words in Greek, not 3. And it's the same 2-word expression as all the other ones. Ego, I me, I am. And some people have claimed, well, that's just how you would say I am he. I'm like, I know. But this is in the middle of the Gospel of John, where Jesus keeps kind of making a big dramatic point of saying I am, as in Yahweh. And in some ways, this might be the most obvious one. Because they say, here's who you're looking for, Jesus of Nazareth. And he says, I am. Cut out that he. He says, I am, and they fall to the ground. In Philippians, Paul says, every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is the I am. You probably used to the translation that Jesus Christ is Lord, but it's quoting from the Old Testament, and the Hebrew word is Yahweh. It's saying every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is the I am. Jesus says, I am, and they all fall down. This isn't a coincidence, okay? He is showing this. He is showing them and us who he is before he lets them take him. He's saying, you can't take me. I'm going. I lay my life down of my own accord, and I'll take it back up again. So the point of all of this is Jesus isn't a representation. He is not an illustration of something else. He is grace and truth. He is the I am. And all these other things are just pictures of him, of his grace and truth. Any questions or comments? All right. Well, we'll close with the doxology. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise him, all creatures here below. Praise him above, ye heavenly host. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost.